Is your magic meter running low? Well, we've got a cure for you. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePauli, and today on the show, I have Allison Abbate visiting the show to discuss her 2012 stop-motion movie, Tim Burton's Frankenweenie, of which she was a producer. Allison shares stories about the making of this movie, as well as a bit about Tim Burton's creative process. She also touches on the work she did for The Nightmare Before Christmas and various other movies. This is a great film to watch during this spooky season. Might I suggest watching the original live-action short right before watching this feature-length animated version, both of which are available on Disney+. I had a great time chatting with Allison, and it's all coming your way right after this. Hey Disney fans, looking for a magical addition to your wardrobe? Check out Who's Its and What's Its. They are superfans creating fashion for superfans. Their mission? To find the subtle, deep cuts and references in the Disney stories that you love and transform them into magical apparel, hats, and pins. If you believe in Hocus Pocus, their Black Flame candle tee from their Halloween collection might be what you need. Or perhaps you're more of a Nightmare Before Christmas sort of person. If so, check out their Trick-or-Treaters tee, inspired by the Tim Burton classic. Right now, save 15% off your entire order using promo code DCTC. Visit who'sitswhatsits.com today and spark some magic in your closet. That site is spelled like who'sitswhatsits.com, or you can just click on the link in this episode's description. Once again, it's who'sitswhatsits.com and use promo code DCTC to save 15% off your entire order.
Prepare for some insight. You've tuned in to an exclusive DCTC interview.
Hello, Allison. Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your movie Frankenweenie, but before we get to that, I feel like we've got to rewind a bit to a different Frankenweenie that wasn't yours, and that is the live-action short that Tim Burton made in 1984. And I'm kind of curious, when did that short film originally hit your radar?
I would say I probably saw the original Frankenweenie when I started working on The Nightmare Before Christmas, because I did not see it in 1984. But I remember if it was on some DVD or something, but I remember seeing like Vincent and Frankenweenie. So it was probably sometime around the Nightmare Before Christmas era when I was just getting to know Tim and also getting to know his whole world. So I feel like that's when it first came across my radar.
Interestingly enough, my introduction to the original short was the Nightmare Before Christmas DVD that had both Vincent and Frankenweenie on it.
Yeah, I think that I saw it before that because I think we saw it when we were doing sort of preparation for Nightmare Before Christmas. So I feel like they must have screened it for us because I don't know how we would have seen it.
Yeah, it was this weird little film. I think it was on Disney Channel for a while. I don't know what the original intentions were. And it's really kind of surprising that Disney was like, yeah, let's make this. Because Tim Burton's style, it has become Disney, but it wasn't Disney, you know? And it's so interesting.
It was he had such a refreshingly sort of like unique perspective and a unique style. And he was such a passionate filmmaker that it felt like, because first of all, one of the things is that it's such a great idea. Like The Nightmare Before Christmas and Vincent and that era of stuff from Tim was just they were such great ideas. So you're like, of course, I've had a dog now. I had my first dog just quite recently, but I would do anything on the face of this earth to bring that guy back to life when and if I'm assuming he's never going to die, but if he did, I would harness the power of lightning to bring him back. So it is such a visceral feeling. And it's so Tim to find a story that would combine like the iconic Frankenstein story, but instead of creating a monster, it's to use that to create your true love and bring your true love back. And there's just something so poignant and so perfectly Tim about it that I'm sure the Disney execs at that time were like, go for it. Like, let's see what this guy can do.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm curious, though, when you saw that short originally, At that moment, did you think to yourself, oh, wow, this could be expanded and become a feature?
I did not think it. I would not have said that it occurred to me, because it was such a perfect little thing. Like, it really worked beautifully as you know, and also it's such a great showcase of his directorial and cinematic sensibilities, because it's just in certain little images, and just the water coming out of the collar, like you could see his drawings come to life, and it just seemed like a perfect little gem. I would say the first time that was when I was on Corpse Bride and finishing up Corpse Bride with Tim, and Don talked to me about the fact that they had been expanding this and talking about making a bigger movie about it. And then when I had spoken to Tim, his thing was he always wanted to do more. He wanted to see what the world of that whole suburbia in Burbank in that era of his own growing up. So he had a lot more ideas of how he wanted to open the movie up. So I think those guys had been sort of kicking it around for years. And I know that Tim had more stories to tell. So that's when we started talking about it.
It's so funny, that whole like suburban Burbank thing, because I did not grow up. I grew up in Massachusetts, but I live in Burbank right now. And I got to tell you, like, I get nostalgic feels even watching Frankenweenie. I've lived here for a while now, but I certainly did not grow up here. And it I don't know, there's something beautiful about Burbank, and Tim Burton's films seem to capture that innocent suburban life, even like Edward Scissorhands, which isn't Burbank, but just that suburb life. I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that when they made the original short, they didn't shoot it in Burbank. They shot it in sort of that kind of bungalow heaven in Pasadena. And that isn't really the suburbia that Tim grew up in. So I think when we went to make the animated movie, he was really about going back to the actual recollection of his own youth and his own growing up in Burbank. So it was a little bit different. I think in the live action one, the bungalow heaven is perfect, but it wasn't completely accurate, I think, to his memory of the inspiration for that movie.
Now, you did touch upon Nightmare Before Christmas. We got to mention that for a second. You were an artistic coordinator on this film. I believe you said this is where you met Tim Burton and gotten kind of in his world.
Yeah. I had worked with Kathleen Gavin, who was the producer of that movie. She had worked on Rescuers Down Under at Dizney, and I loved Tim's movies, the movies that I had seen of his at that point, because I think Beetlejuice and Batman had come out. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go up and make that movie. I love Halloween. It seems like a perfect for adventure. And I really didn't know anything about stop motion at the time, but I knew, 2D animation from Disney and Kathleen. And then it was sort of a life-changing experience, because I basically coordinated all of the artistic departments on the movie, and no one really knew how to make a movie of stop motion at that point. So they didn't really know how big or small that job would be. And in the end, it ended up being like 26 departments or something like that. I mean, it was just so many people and so many different creative, between from the sculptors, the armature makers, the storyboard artists, the art department, sound, recording, like the writers, like there were so many things that sort of did the breadth of the movie, that it ended up being the best training I could ever have for any job ever in my life, because I really got to immerse with the most talented and creative people on every aspect of the artistic creation of the movie.
And you said that you weren't particularly interested in stop motion, so you just kind of fell into that world.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't really know it existed. It was not something that I had ever thought about. I mean, I loved the Rankin Bass Christmas specials, but it was not something that I even knew was a career that people had. And really at the time, many of the animators had come from like Gumby and the Pillsbury Doughboy commercials, but it wasn't like there was an industry for stop motion animation movies. And in a lot of ways, we didn't know what we didn't know. And I think it was a good thing, because it's pretty daunting if you think about how hard it is to make these movies. And it just was a bunch of young people who just dove in with both feet. Tim's vision was so pure and clear and wonderful for that story. And then Henry Selick was just the perfect visionary to kind of bring it to life. And Danny Elfman was his personality and his talents were so intrinsically kind of woven into the fabric of that movie, that it was just such an amazingly creative and inventive time period with the most amazing and creative people. And we just kind of like happened upon it. So it was amazing.
That's awesome. Do you happen to know why Tim Burton did not direct Nightmare Before Christmas? Obviously, Henry Selick did a fantastic job, but It is so Tim Burton. And I think it surprises a lot of people to learn he was not the director of that film.
Knowing them all, I feel like it is also so Henry Selick. I think that, it takes a long time he was sort of had a really, his live action career was going so gangbusters that I felt like you can't really take 2 to 3 years out to really immerse and dig in and direct one of these movies. And Henry was such an expert in stop motion animation, had done so much. They had been colleagues and students together at CalArts. So it felt like the right combination of skills and vision to actually make the movie what it is. So to me, I always feel like that movie is such a combination of those Danny, Henry, and obviously Tim, and then also throw in some Joe Ranft in the middle there because he was the head of story and he just was such a genius that, to me, that's the package.
I love that. That's fantastic. You did go on to make Corpse Bride with another studio, Warner Brothers, and I am curious, was that ever pitched to Disney?
I don't know if it was. I remember talking about it, or I remember Joe Ranft talking about it because I think it was an idea that Joe had, and I don't know if it was. I think it may have come up when Tim was doing movies like Batman and stuff at Warner Brothers, and that's why it was pitched to Warner Brothers. But I don't know that it was ever pitched to Disney.
Okay. So that brings us to Frankenweenie in 2012, the feature-length stop-motion version. Now, the original was live action. Was that ever a discussion with the feature-length version that it might be live action?
I think Tim was really keen to do it in stop motion. I think he felt like there's only so much you could get out of a live action dog. And since Frankenweenie really is the titular star of the movie, he really felt like animation was the right way to execute a full-length version because he really wanted to be able to get the acting and the emotion and the sort of comedy out of the dog that you really would be difficult to get out of a real dog, and also just push some of the scope of it for an animal. He loved the stitches, and so I think for him it was important that it was sort of that. A recollection of a story that he came up with in his youth with the medium that he loved so much and was so close to his heart. So it felt like the right medium for it.
Excellent. Now, this film is, it's perfect for this time of year, this spooky season, but people don't associate it. I think everybody goes Nightmare Before Christmas. That's where their head goes immediately with this. But I found this interesting. I was rewatching the live action short as well. Did you remember that the live action short actually takes place during the Halloween season? Because you see a Happy Halloween sign in the classroom.
Yes.
But we don't get that in the animated version. At least not that I noticed.
Yeah, no, there isn't. We did not make it in Halloween. I'm not sure. I don't know that it was not a purposeful thing. I think that they were in school, so it was going to be, in Burbank, it's always summer, so it looks like summer even if it is Christmas time. So I think that I don't know that it was a conscious decision not to make it for Halloween.
Well, regardless, it's still great for the spooky season.
Absolutely.
And, has the Frankenstein monster tie-in and everything, which is always fun. And so it sounds like you came into the process, a decision had already been made. I believe you said a conversation with Don Hahn that they were already developing it as a feature-length story.
Yeah, they have been developing for a long time as a feature-length story. When we finished Corpse Bride, I brought Fantastic Mr. Fox with Wes Anderson into that same studio. So we were kind of doing that. So the concept was, and working with Don, was like, this would be a great thing to have for the space, for that team after Fantastic Mr. Fox. So there was a couple of years in between where we were talking about it, going back and forth. John August was writing the script. And then in 2009, it really began in earnest, where we started to sort of crew up and gear up for the movie.
Now, were you involved at all in the discussions or the process of making it feature length? Because, that short really is kind of perfect as far as just beginning, middle, end. It's there. So it's such a daunting task to be okay, but we're making a feature. So how do you add stuff that doesn't feel like fluff, essentially?
Yeah, I had talked to Tim about it during that time. And again, his thing was he had wanted to expand on the story of the dog and kind of the performance. He wanted to know more about the world that Victor lives in, the other kids at school, and really bringing out that feeling that you get, just more personality and more specificity in the other sort of the villagers, so to speak. So for Tim, he felt like there was more story to tell, more world building to do. So that was were always things that we talked about. And then John August Scripps pretty much gave us the roadmap for how to open it up, and really just go a little bit more into the joy of having, because that's one of the things about the short is it's so short. You don't get a lot of time, to know Sparky before the accident. So you're kind of bringing to it a horror of any dog getting hit by a car and having to, but he really wanted to imbue it with the specificity of their sweet relationship and their kind of unique bond. So we actually, so now in the feature, we have more time before Sparky has his accident. And then also to again, as I mentioned, build out the world, have more of the sort of the villagers manifest, and also have more scenes of how fun it is to have a dog that has been brought back to life and what that would be like. So just kind of really getting able to enjoy and savor these great moments that were sort of hinted at in the short, but actually able to breathe more in the movie.
Yeah, there definitely was, as I was watching the feature length, I was laughing out loud quite a few times. I was like, wow, there's a lot of great comedic moments in this film that I didn't get in the short. So I guess that's, like everything you're saying, building the world, getting to know these characters better, and comedy really helped it. And it's so, it's a twisted story.
Yeah.
Yet it's so fun to have such comedic moments in it.
Yeah, and that's such a vintage of Tim Burton that is so unique to him, is that way that he can mine comedy and pathos at the same time as giving you some spooks and some chills, and just kind of he walks that fine line between all of those things so well that you don't realize how much your heart is breaking for these spooky things.
Now, Tim Burton, obviously has a vision, has a very strong vision, knows what he wants, but at the same time, I'm assuming here, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming he must be an incredible collaborator because it's just such a collaborative process. But I am curious, how do you collaborate with someone? I mean, you're a producer, you obviously have a lot of say in this film. How do you collaborate with somebody who has such a strong vision and get your kind of thoughts into the process? Well,
what's great about Tim is that I think that he is so generous with his vision and so clear as to what's important to him that it is, I'm not going to say easy, because it's clear how to sort of serve him up things and how to kind of go back and forth and push and pull stuff that are going to be within the vision that he's sort of set out. And I think that it's a unique thing to have your North Star be so clear, it's easy to get to it. So that's kind of the concept that I have, is that his North Star of his taste, his vision, his heart, the heartfulness of the story that he tells, he's very clear about what he's looking for. He also likes to work with people that he's worked with before. So we had, Danny Elfman did the music, and John August wrote the script, and I'm on the movie, and Don's on the movie, and like people that have, again, unfortunately, Joe Ramp was no longer with us, but certainly on Corpse Bride, he would have him as a consultant. Rick Heinrichs was our production designer on Frankenweenie, who had been with him when he kind of first did the short. So I think also having, Chris Lippin's the editor, is a huge part of collaborating with Tim. So you get a lot of the shorthand that we have of sort of knowing him and knowing what he's looking for. And then, our animation director is a guy named Trey Thomas, who worked on Nightmare and Corpse Bride, and really was just from the start was in Tim's head. Like they would finish each other's sentences, and like really kind of he loved his animation, and Trey would completely understand, where he was looking to go. So having him sort of on the ground day to day also was a great way to kind of be able to execute for Tim and kind of get as close to that North Star as you could. So then when he did a correction, it wasn't starting back from the beginning.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that Tim Burton ended up at Disney. It's like a happy accident, it feels like, because, he was working on these films like Fox and the Hound, that when I think of Tim Burton sitting down, drawing those sorts of characters, and then I think of like his illustrations that are just so, different from each other. It always amazes me that not only that he ended up at Disney with that sort of job drawing those sorts of characters, but also that like he was so embraced by Disney. I mean, clearly the man is talented, and I guess I'm grateful that somebody at Disney was smart enough to recognize that and not just say, hey, that's off brand, it's not going to work here, sort of thing.
I know it is, we're very fortunate that somebody had the vision to see it, but it isn't hard to tell that his stuff is really special. And again, it's the content, it's the thinking. It's not just about the line quality and the drawings and the composition of the drawings. Like Tim's whole heart and soul are in those drawings. And so I think that, it is a testament to those execs being open-minded and super, super smart and ahead of the game. But it's hard to miss when you have someone as talented as Tim.
Yeah. Now, at the top of the movie, I love how we see Victor's little homemade movie, and he uses stop motion in this stop motion movie. It's so meta. It made me laugh so much. It's like, this is great. How do you do stop motion of stop motion? I mean, let's just make my life even more difficult.
Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty fun. I don't know how we did it. Whether they roughed it up or the animators that we had and our team was just so wonderful, and they were just so inspired by it. So the fact that they could do that, I think we also made a short of Captain Sparky and we also ended up making a short like would have been the short that he made for the front of the movie. So we kind of kept that meta thing going. It was funny. We just kept looking at Tim as a child and what he did. So the fact that he was a filmmaker made it, we had to, that's why Victor is also a filmmaker, because so much of this movie is sort of autobiographical. It's sort of an autobiographical, fictionalized version of Tim's own youth.
Yeah, it's, he's always got those characters that are kind of misfits and outsiders in his story. And, Victor is very much that in this film. And it's just so good. This film is very old school in the way that it's done, not only with stop motion, which is not a super common style anymore for films, but it's also in black and white. So I find that really interesting because I feel like, with younger people who, let's face it, a large portion of the audience for Frankenweenie is a younger audience, but I feel like there's a hesitation to give black and white a chance. So, and I know the original short was shot in black and white as well. I'm curious, number one, was there ever conversation about it being in color? And number two, was it shot in black and white, if that makes sense? Like, were the models made black and white, or were they kind of given color and then filmed black and white?
It's a really interesting question. I do think that it was always going to be something that the studio would have loved it not to have been in black and white in many ways, because it is always a little bit of a challenge. But I think Tim was pretty clear from minute one, it's going to be in black and white. So let's not even start a conversation if that's going to be a problem. And then also because I think I'm paraphrasing him, but I do think that he was so inspired by the black and white films that he saw as a kid, when color also existed, but there was just something about the contrast and the moodiness and the emotion of a black and white movie that he felt he wanted to bring to a new audience. And so for him, it was like, no, I want people to be so fall in love with black and white because of what we are building here. So to that end, how do you get those images to look as beautiful as they do in black and white? And it was not easy at all. It was very, very complicated. It's not just paint the character. First, we painted the characters in colors and then shot them, and they did not look like beautiful black and white. Then we would paint them on black and white, but then they were too gray. And then it was really a little bit like sometimes things would be red in order to look black, or they would be really green in order to look kind of a medium tone. I don't remember the corollary, but we had to very specifically test certain paints, certain colors, so that sometimes the puppets looked kind of kooky because they were crazy colors. But fundamentally speaking, some of them were often very black, gray, and then these certain colors that would have to pop in order to be like a bright white or a bright black within the frame.
That's interesting. So some of the stuff was actually color and it was shot in black and white to create that look. That's really interesting. Now, this is going to sound like a weird comment, and I don't even know if I'm making sense saying this, but in the past, when I've seen these stop motion sorts of movies, maybe it was just an unwillingness to suspend my disbelief, but the characters always looked miniature to me. I could tell these are dolls in this, small world. When I was watching Frankenweenie, it felt life-size to me. And I don't know if it's anything y'all did or if my head was just in a different spot watching it or what, but it felt life-size.
Well, I think that was a big testament to the cinematographer, Pete Sorg, and Tim Ledbury, who did the VFX. I think one of the things that I thought was exciting about how we did Frankenweenie, on Corpse Bride, I remember people giving us a compliment, saying, "Oh my God, it was so beautiful and so smooth. It almost looked like CG." And I was like, okay, thank you, but we don't want that compliment. Like, we want it to look stop motion. So I think in a weird way, there was a little roughing up that happened to the actual character designs. We wanted you to feel like the fingerprints, and you wanted to feel the hair and feel the fabric and the textures of the clothes. So in some ways, we kind of went design-wise to some more simplistic things, and certainly to the style of animation. But then on the other hand, I think we really embraced VFX and how it could help us. So like, for instance, Sparky's little tiny legs are so difficult to do. But having him on a rig that we could do and shooting him against green would give us the ability to kind of have the freedom of animation. But then also the green screen allowed you to really give you sort of vistas and sequences that you wouldn't have to necessarily build in the space. So in some ways, while it's all very, very much all done by hand, we kind of had our VFX team in-house so that we were really kind of making the shots hand in hand. And those artists worked so hard just to kind of retain the stop motion handmade quality, but give you that scope and scale of a big cinematic image. And I just think we did a really good job of kind of hitting it right on the head as far as like nailing both types of things.
Yeah, it's like I said, it looks so real world to me. It's incredible. I am curious though. So Nightmare Before Christmas was approximately 20 years earlier. How much more VFX stuff do we see in Frankenweenie than we do in something like Nightmare Before Christmas?
Nightmare Before Christmas, first of all, they had frame grabbers where you could only see 3 hazy frames, and that was all you got. So you had like it was all shot on film, so you're on, it's a white knuckle ride to watch like the dailies on next morning because you were hoping that nothing broke. And, and certainly like we have video assists now. So there's technological things. Corpse Bride we did on, and Frankenweenie were both shot sort of on digital cameras, which means you can get much closer. They can move around much more easily because they're not these gigantic cameras swinging around. And then, like I said, I think that certainly rig removal, replacing backgrounds or doing set extensions and things like that really helped us to kind of give you a little more breadth than you could have had, certainly in Nightmare, where we had the benefit of very dark backgrounds. And so the stylistic quality of the art direction on that movie worked because of the subject matter. But in a quote unquote realistic suburban Burbank, you couldn't really take those kind of liberties. And so I think you had to walk that line of sort of fantasy and reality. And I think that by harnessing the best versions of both of those mediums, I think we did.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, one thing that I noticed watching both of these, the short and the feature back to back, is there are quite a few, exact shots or replicated shots, which are so cool. And I'm curious, was that something that Tim Burton wanted from the beginning? Did you guys sit and watch the original short and be like, oh, that, because Sparky running into the street and seeing the car coming toward him and stuff? It's pretty much shot for shot remake.
We didn't. I mean, maybe the team did. I certainly did not, working with the storyboard artist, I'm not sure that we were trying to match anything shot for shot. I think that some things are just iconic and they work.
Yes.
And certainly in the reincarnation sequence, so much of that is very much like the short, but then it's also very much like Frankenstein. It's very much like Young Frankenstein. It's very much like many Frankensteins, because those are sort of iconic shots that you need to have in the telling of this kind of story. And I think we were paying homage to so many of the old movies that a lot of stuff I think we pulled from, to be evocative of those original movies.
I love that whole Frankenstein sequence and, the lightning. There is something in there, though, that it made me go back and check something, because the bicycle with the spiral on the wheels, I was like, I am pretty sure that Pee Wee Herman's bicycle has that. And indeed, not in black and white there, it's red. Yeah. But, I guess maybe that started in the short original, and then Pee Wee Herman got those spirals on his bicycle, which I think is kind of cool as well. Now, earlier you were talking about how Tim likes to work with the same team of people. Luckily for you, you're part of that team now, which is amazing. But it's not just the behind-the-scenes crew. His actors, we see them pop up again and again and again. And, people like Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, Martin Landau, and they're all part of this film. And I'm curious, is that kind of, when the story is being developed, is it like, oh yeah, that's a Catherine role? Or, is that, how does that come about?
I think he was very active in casting, and definitely was like, I want Catherine to play all those roles, because Catherine got 3 roles, Martin Short got 3 roles. He definitely wrote Mr. Roskrewski for Martin Landau. So like, definitely he has people in mind when he's sort of crafting a character. And, casting his movies is really easy because people don't say no. Like, it just seems like they love working with him. So it's great. The finding of the victor, Charlie Tahan, was, and also Atticus Shaffer playing
Atticus. Oh my gosh, Atticus.
Oh my God. Casting those kids was probably the only, the biggest challenge of casting the movie, just because we wanted to find fresh voices, and we wanted to really find people who would be those, people who could embody those characters. And, and Charlie was such you had to find someone who could have the sweetness in the voice, but also the depth of sort of wisdom and sadness in his voice. And, it was Tim. So you were really trying to find someone that Tim see as a version of himself. So it was a very personal kind of endeavor. And we did a lot of people, and we're so happy with Charlie. I think he did such a great job, and he's such an amazing actor. And then Atticus was just like a revelation. I think I saw him on I don't know, Tonight Show or something. Where it was before The Middle. I feel like he might have been on The Middle, but I hadn't seen him on that. But I think I saw him as a guest, and then I watched The Middle, and I was like, no, there's no one else on earth that can play this part. He's just so perfect. And he was a delight to work with.
I am a big fan of The Middle, so I've heard his voice mature through that entire thing. And that was 2009, I believe, that show first started airing. And so when would you have recorded him?
Probably 2010. Yeah, it was right around the first season of The Middle. And I was living in England, so it wasn't like we were getting shows right away. And so it was just an interesting, he felt like such a discovery. He was so smart. And that character is a little bit of a spoof of Peter Lorre. And I think he was 10 years old or 9 or something he was such a little kid. And I remember talking to him about Peter Lorre and how we wanted that. And first day at the audition, he said, okay, so do you want the manipulative Peter Lorre or the really obsequious Peter Lorre? There's 2 different kinds. And he was this little guy. And I was just I don't know, try both. It was such a great, audition where I was this kid is really thinking about it. And I mean, it was just so special working with him. So the kids were great.
That's so funny. Another, Tim Burton staple we see is Christopher Lee, but on screen, on the TV screen in the film, which is really funny, from one of his old Dracula movies. And I was like, he fit him in there. So was there ever any conversation about bringing back Daniel Stern or Shelley Duvall for those voices of the parents?
There really was not. I think he really wanted to reconnect with Martin Short and felt like he liked the idea of doing multiple characters for the dad, and the dad is one of them. And then he liked the idea of Catherine O'Hara having sort of the suburban mom and the weird girl, and so she could have and the gym teacher, so she could really kind of stretch out and do different voices. So I think the both of them, and then we recorded them often together, so they are dear friends.
Oh, great! And that's so rare.
Oh my God, it was so fun. And they've been dear friends and have known each other obviously for years and years. Both Canadian, so they go way back. And so just having those sessions were some of the funnest days of my life, because just being in the room with those 2 were so wonderful. And then they loved each other, and then they loved him. So it was just such a joy.
Now, you mentioned that he, reconnected with Martin Short. What had he worked on Martin Short with?
I think he was in Mars Attacks.
Oh, gosh, yes. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was one of the ones that was how did Martin Short get involved with this? And the thing that I really liked about at least the dad character was it was kind of a straight man for Martin Short, which I don't think I'd ever seen him do before. It was interesting because I was I know this voice, but I'm not used to hearing this voice this way,
Well, he's so talented. He can do anything. And it was fun to have him in the recordings when we were doing all 3 voices, kind of doing the straight and then the crazy and then the all over the place. So he was wonderful.
That's awesome. Now, one of the things that we get in this movie that we don't get in the short is kind of these other weird, crazy animals crossbreeding and such. And it gets kind of wild there for a while. I'm curious, was that something that of that maybe Tim wanted to do with the original short, but just didn't have the time or budget or whatever?
Yeah, I think think he really wanted to kind of spoof not just Frankenstein, but also the Mummy, and also, like the Godzilla from the Godzilla series.
The old Godzilla films, which he also spoofed in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Of course, yes. He loves those. So like there's so many passions of Tim that kind of found their way. And so this was just a great opportunity to kind of have those characters and be able to kind of give those little glimpses of that. And then, of course, the monsters were so wonderful. And then the monsters kind of attacking, just kind of, you needed to ratchet up the action. So this kind of really helped us.
Yeah, one thing I loved is that you brought sea monkeys into the movie, because I have a weird love for sea monkeys. I'm not even kidding. Like, currently have packets of the eggs and stuff that I'm done. I need to throw in water soon, because I just think that they're magical. And it seemed very random, but I was so happy that, it's one of those things that I'm like, I have a nostalgia for, but I don't think anybody else does.
You would be surprised. More people than you think do. I think certainly people of a certain generation, just the concept that you could send away for a packet of weird brine shrimp, desiccated brine shrimp that would come back to life, like, it was just so crazy and so perfect for sort of the creature from the Black Lagoon concept. And so we just had so much fun with those crazy monsters. And then the Mr. Whiskers was so just insane. And, even back on Nightmare, there were sort of cat bats that we, that is such a sort of a running iconography for Tim's monster creations. And I just thought that Mr. Whiskers was hysterical and the weird girl was so weird. And it just was, I love that sequence when the transformation happens. It's one of my favorites in her little bedroom. So.
Yeah, I want to go on a Sea Monkeys tangent for a real quick second, because I'm curious. Have you seen like the 15-minute documentary about the guy who created Sea Monkeys?
No.
Okay, it's on YouTube. It's an animated kind of documentary. Look it up, because you will be shocked by the information.
Oh, I will.
Fantastic.
So fun.
And then the other thing is, do you remember the Saturday morning sitcom live action Sea Monkeys show?
I don't.
Oh gosh, this was probably the 90s, where they had people on like full-on prosthetics. Look it up on YouTube sometime. It's terrifying.
Oh my God.
Did not last long.
Oh my God.
But sea monkeys are magical. I love them, and there's that. Quick random question. I notice in the movie on a theater marquee, we see the title in big letters, Bambi. And I was curious, do you have any idea why that title was chosen?
I don't know why that total. I remember him really wanting it, and we had to get permission to put it on there. I think he just wanted a real contrast to what was happening in the foreground to what was happening in the background. So I think that probably is it. But that's what he wanted. So
I was wondering if it was maybe to set the time period of the story, because I'm actually not sure. Is it? But when does it take place within?
It's supposed to take place, I think, in like the 50s, 60s, but I think Bambi came out before that.
Bambi would have been before that.
Yeah, so whether it was in re-release, so they re-released them. Yeah. But I do think that in some ways it just felt like a nice contrast, a sort of irony.
The juxtaposition. Yeah, interesting. Do you have anything else you want to add? Any great memories of making this film?
They're all such great memories of making the film. I just feel like it was such a happy time for us. I do remember one of the funny things, just talking about Burbank, that I always like to say is, that we made the movie in England, and Rick Heinrichs was the production designer, and we had a great team of in the art department and the construction crew of English, artists, and we kept designing these stucco buildings, and they were very plain. And then we'd go down, and they would be sort of like, there'd be little sort of decorations and little bits of brick, and we're like, well, what's going on there? And they're like, it can't possibly be this boring and this nothing. And we were like, yeah, it is. Like we had to go to Burbank and take pictures of how not boring, but just plain. Everything in those days was very plain and just very stucco. And they didn't even understand what stucco was. Like, that was just not something that occurred to the British people. Also, this concept of a town that is obsessed with Dutch things and windmills was something that, like, they were like, I don't understand why. What do you mean? Like, it wasn't really Dutch, and it wasn't really German. It wasn't really American. It was such a weird, and so I had to go to Solvang in California and just take pictures of how every building is a windmill, because it's such a thing that growing up in California, of these places that are sort of kitschily obsessed with things being Dutch, which was perfect for Tim, I think, as a child who saw the sort of the Dutch villagers in Frankenstein and put the two and two together. But it's just, without living in California and knowing how real those things are, and those are just down the road, it was just really fun to try and get to kind of teach them that we can be this weird in America. So it was fun.
I do love the recreation of like the whole the Frankenstein finale with the windmill. It's one of my favorite homages in the film, along with the whole bringing the creature back to life moment. But it's I don't know if everybody catches that one necessarily, because I feel like Frankenstein's one of those movies that everybody knows Frankenstein, but a ton of people haven't seen, and maybe the whole windmill finale isn't as commonly known. So
right.
I don't know. I think it's great.
Yeah,
So
it was a perfect combination. So I feel like that was great. And then I just want to always shout out to Danny Elfman and the score. It is, I think, one of my favorite Danny Elfman, Tim Burton scores. It's so beautiful. I feel like he does such a great job again of capturing the horror, the heart, also the real Americana of it. And I just think that if you have a chance just to pop on that soundtrack, it is just some of the most beautiful music. I love it so much.
And if I'm remembering correctly, it's like top to bottom music. There's very little silence in the film.
Yeah, I think that it was important that, especially if you look at the old movies of the time, music was very prominent. And as always with, score and film go hand in hand, and then even more so in so many ways with Tim and Danny. But this was something that was really important, that the score be right. I just think that he really nailed it. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
That's great. Do you have a couple minutes just to ask one last thing?
Sure.
Okay, cool. I'm going to rewind to 1990 real quickly. Rescuers Down Under, just because I knew you were an assistant production manager on that, I believe. But this film is just fascinating to me because, it was after Mermaid, before Beauty and the Beast, yet often not talked about because it, didn't do well. But I'm just curious, what was the feeling in the air working on that film? Were you so intimidated by Little Mermaid's success, or were you aware of what was going on with Beauty and the Beast?
You know what was interesting about that time? Because I have to say that I'm so proud of that movie. And I was, I started as a temp. I was answering phones, and then I just kind of got whipped into the whole feature animation. I didn't really set out. So to me, Rescuers was... They knew that Little Mermaid was huge. I remember going to the premiere of Little Mermaid and being like, oh my God, we are on the ground floor of something very exciting. But what our task was we had to switch the studio over from traditional cell painting animation to a digitally painted movie. And again, similar to Nightmare, no one knew if it could be done. It had never been done before. We were a bunch of kids trying to figure out the mind-boggling technology and the mind-boggling creative endeavor of figuring out how to make this a seamless process. And I am so, so proud of that movie and that team that made it, because yes, it doesn't get a lot of fanfare, but there would be no Beauty and the Beast without Rescuers Down Under. And I think we all, in many ways, felt that way. We felt like they were building it on our shoulders, and we were proud to support it, because it did feel like I know Tom Schumacher, who's gone on to run theatrical and produced many movies and with them. But I remember him being the producer and being like, this is it. We got to figure this out for everybody. And it felt like the team really pulled together to do it. So I'm so proud of that movie. And I think those guys did a great job.
I'm so happy you said that, because that's exactly its significance in the future of animation is so important. And I think that's wonderful. And it's just a film that isn't talked about when you talk about that Renaissance. And but I love that you're so proud of it and so happy with it.
I really am, yeah. And I like an impossible task. I think it set me on the road to pursue impossible tasks in these movies. And I like figuring out new things. And I think that I learned that skill on that movie, really. That's where I got my foundation. So thanks to them.
Excellent. Well, Allison, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. This was all super interesting. And I'm excited to see what you do in the future, because your past stuff is fantastic. So thank you.
Well, it was great talking to you, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Now, folks, if you enjoyed my conversation with Allison, guess what? You can hear even more from her on That Halloween Podcast a bit later on this month. If you haven't checked out That Halloween Podcast yet, find a link in this episode's description to do so. There's lots of Halloween and often Disney goodness going on over there. And if you haven't listened yet, be sure to check out Ghost Stories from Within the Disney Parks on last week's episode of Disney Coast to Coast. And next week, we're talking about an unrealized Disney attraction featuring a property that Disney once owned that you probably have no idea about. It's fascinating, and it's coming your way next week. And of course, the subject matter will be perfect for the spooky season. If you have any guesses on what property you think I'm talking about, let me know on social media. The easiest way to make sure you don't miss any of the magic is by subscribing to Disney Coast to Coast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you search, don't forget, it's Disney with a Z, Coast to Coast. And finally, to become a member of the DCTC community and gain rewards, visit patreon.com/DisneyCTC. That's patreon.com/DIZNEYCTC. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the DePodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at DePodcastNetwork.com. That's DEPodcastNetwork.com.